Trump cancels planned Iran strikes, says a deal near as multinational agreement advances. Egypt welcomes Trump's cancellation of Iran strikes, urges diplomacy and regional de-escalation. An Israeli occupation says they took control of Wadi al-Saluqi in southern Lebanon despite ceasefire deal. Nine p.m. Cairo local time for the news on the top of the hour. And we begin with U.S. President Donald Trump, as he said he planned strikes on Iran were cancelled after progress in negotiations and that a deal is nearing completion. U.S. President Donald Trump announced the cancellation of planned military strikes against Iran, saying negotiations have reached the highest levels of Iranian leadership and received approval from all relevant parties. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said maritime restrictions will remain in place until the agreement is finalized, adding that the time and location of the signing will be announced soon. He also said that multiple countries were involved in the understanding process, including Egypt, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Pakistan, Bahrain, Kuwait, Jordan, Turkey, and Israel, alongside other participating states. Iran said much of the draft negotiating text has been completed, but no final agreement has been reached. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baqai said a large portion of the text under negotiation with the United States has been finalized, according to Iran's Tasnim news agency. Baqai accused Washington of continuing to change its positions during the talks, while noting that Qatar and Pakistan are playing active mediation roles. He said U.S. actions are affecting the diplomatic process and stressed that Iran will not compromise on what it considers its red lines. The spokesman added that Tehran has not yet made a final decision regarding any potential agreement. Egypt has welcomed U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to cancel planned military strikes against Iran, calling it an opportunity to advance diplomacy. Egypt expressed relief following U.S. President Donald Trump's announcement that planned military strikes against Iran had been cancelled, saying the move creates an opportunity to support diplomatic efforts and reduce tensions in the region. In a statement, Egypt's foreign ministry said it hopes the opportunity will be used to resolve outstanding issues, help and end the conflict, and pave the way for a new phase of regional stability based on dialogue and peaceful conflict resolution. Cairo added that it is continuing coordination with regional and international partners to support de-escalation and reach an agreement that addresses the concerns of all parties involved. Egypt also reiterated the importance of safeguarding the security and sovereignty of Gulf states and expressed hope that an end to the conflict with Iran would refocus international attention on humanitarian and security conditions in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. Axios reported that the United States is preparing for the possible signing of an agreement with Iran in Geneva. According to Axios, 4 U.S. military transport aircraft of the C-17 type departed for Europe on Thursday, carrying equipment linked to the potential travel of U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance to attend a possible signing ceremony for an agreement with Iran in Geneva. The report said the proposed memorandum of understanding would include the immediate reopening of the Strait of Hormuz without transit fees, alongside sanctions relief for Iran. According to reports, details, the agreement would also extend the ceasefire for 60 days and create a framework for further negotiations on Iran's nuclear program. Bahrain's King Hamad bin Isa and US President Donald Trump discussed efforts to reach a US-Iran memorandum of understanding. Bahrain's King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa held a phone call with US President Donald Trump on Thursday to discuss efforts aimed at reaching a memorandum of understanding between the United States and Iran, as well as broader regional and international developments. According to the Bahrain news agency, the Bahraini monarch expressed appreciation for Trump's efforts to support peace and stability in the region and for his support of Bahrain. The agency added that King Hamad also congratulated Trump on the opening of the 2026 FIFA World Cup, praising the success of the tournament's opening ceremony. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that US President Donald Trump remains committed to dismantling Iran's enrichment program and restricting its missile capabilities. Netanyahu said US President Donald Trump has committed to dismantling Iran's uranium enrichment program and imposing limits on its missiles activities. According to Netanyahu's office, the two leaders discussed the emerging memorandum of understanding between Washington and Tehran during a phone call on Thursday. The statement said Netanyahu expressed cautious optimism about the possibility of reaching an agreement. Meanwhile, Axios reported that Netanyahu was surprised by Trump's decision to suspend planned military strikes against Iran and by his public comments suggesting that an agreement with Tehran could be close. U.S. officials said American forces shot down 2 Iranian drones near the Strait of Hormuz. U.S. officials told Reuters that American forces intercepted and destroyed 2 Iranian drones on Friday, suggesting that Tehran may have been attempting to target commercial vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz. The official did not provide further details about the location or circumstances of the interceptions. Well, for further analysis, we're now moved to Mark Summers in our newsroom. Mark, good morning.
Good morning, Mona. Yes, good morning, everybody. Yes, let's see what has been happening, get the opinion of journalist and writer Mohammed Ali Hassan. Good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us here on Qnews. So we've been here before. It's happened many times over the last few weeks. Trump decided to suspend the strikes on Iran at the last moment. What's your view on why Trump decided to do that?
This is the 8th time President Donald Trump decides to suspend the strikes against Iran for several reasons. First, the first reason is related for President Trump that he has promised that there is a deal underway, and it's now being finalized when it comes to the items and the framework for implementation with Iran. And sometimes the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Iran and the officials responsible for the negotiations has negated that any items has been reached or anything has been agreed upon so far. Also, the mediators are applying pressures in Pakistan, in Egypt and Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and also some of the countries from the West and from the European Union are pressuring in order to reach an agreement with Iran, given the ongoing crisis at a global level economically because of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Also, President Donald Trump is well aware that the Iranian escalation through attacking vital areas in the Arab Gulf and the Iranian responses against the United States in the Gulf countries will prompt the resentment of the Arab world as a whole.
Yeah, well, let's come back to the events. Of course, we're well aware of what has been happening, but it's deja vu all over again, as they say, with this announcement that a deal is about to be reached. We've heard it many times. We're also hearing out of Iran that this might not be true, but he has given some details. He says J.D. Vance is going to be there in Europe, perhaps, to sign the deal. Do you think this time it might actually be true?
I suppose this time it might be true. It's closer to the times before. Given what has happened yesterday or the leak that we have seen regarding the verbal altercation between the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States. Netanyahu said that he has nothing to do with any deal with Iran, and he gave the entire responsibility to President Trump to end the nuclear program in Iran, and this is the main concern for the Israeli government and for the Prime Minister, that who are now being threatened by the looming elections. And also we're talking about the announced item, according to sources, that Lebanon will be part of the agreement, will be one of the items on this agreement, and a truce will be implemented with a ceasefire, a true ceasefire. But the Israeli Prime Minister announced that Israel will not commit and comply with any ceasefire in Lebanon, and that they have the right to defend themselves according to the claims announced by the Prime Minister's office. Also, the four planes that have headed to Europe a few hours ago are indicating the potential of the Vance reaching Geneva very soon to
Okay,
sign
well,
the
let
agreement.
me ask you as well. Perhaps it was just a coincidence, but of course the World Cup began last night, jointly hosted by Mexico, the United States, and Canada. Perhaps Trump didn't like the optics of the man who won the inaugural FIFA Peace Prize bombing Iran on the very night he's starting to host the World Cup. Do you think it was just a coincidence that the World Cup was starting last night, that all this rhetoric started coming out of the White House?
Certainly, President Donald Trump wanted to create some sort of momentum for the World Cup, especially that the news that has been reported regarding the Iranian national team and the U.S. stubbornness to give access to the players on the team to the United States after the suffering. They have already been granted visas for some of the players and for some of the administrators, but the rest of the staff were completely prevented from obtaining the visa, and the accommodation was completely transferred to Mexico. President Donald Trump wants to be the first source of news, and this is very known about him. We saw him failing to obtain the Nobel Peace Prize, and we have found the head of the FIFA giving him a prize, which is the FIFA Peace Prize, which has been recently introduced only by President Trump to gain his praises, but we have seen statements even by the head of the FIFA that Trump might introduce these missions to the United States. Will all the national teams be allowed into the United States during the World Cup? And he said yes, but we have found referees being prevented from entering the United States, fans and supporters as well, and even heads of different FIFAs. The head of the Iranian Football Association was prevented from obtaining the visa. He, along with all of the administrators of the Iranian national team. And here the US president wants to be the first source of information, the first source of news, and not only for the World Cup.
And so do you think it's appropriate that a country like the United States should be hosting the World Cup when it is decided to restrict visas for people? We had, as you mentioned there, the Somalian refugee earlier in the week, a referee, sorry, rather than refugee, the Somalian referee who is denied entry and others as well. Do you think it's appropriate that a country like the United States, which is treating the rest of the world like this, should be allowed to host the biggest sporting competition in the world?
Certainly, this is absolutely not appropriate at all. And the laws and rules of the FIFA, or even the football associations from different countries, it is a global competition, and the Iranian national team was qualified after the qualifiers, and we're talking about this old national teams, ancient national teams that has been playing forever in this competition. And there's also been some recent events for in 1966 World Cup in Britain. There was a delegation from North Korea that participated inside Britain in spite of all the issues tying both countries, and they even reached the quarterfinals. And there was a celebration and compassion from the British people with the Korean national team, who has participated for the first time in the quarterfinals. Also, the Senegalese national team was thoroughly examined when they reached in the United States, and they spent so much time in these procedures that were completely unjustified, and there was a lot of resentment and anger. Even the Norwegian European national team was subjected to such procedures, and they were treated in a very bad manner. There's also a player from an African descent in Belgium who did not receive the visa till this moment. Of course, mixing politics with sports in this international global forum that is the World Cup is completely inappropriate and unacceptable, and it reflects how the US administration led by Donald Trump treats the world, and how they treat the countries with a very biased view.
Well, thank you very much, Mohammed Ali Hassan, journalist and writer, joining us from Cairo. And thank you for mentioning the World Cup in 1966, which England won. We'll see if that happens with this one in America. Mona, we mentioned that Mexico began the World Cup last night. Do come back to me shortly for the latest from the World Cup.
Right, thank you, Mark, for the analysis. And we'll get back to you in a few minutes to tell us more about the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Back to our bulletin, and US President Donald Trump said that the United States has ended the war with Iran and secured key commitments from Tehran. US President Donald Trump said the United States ended the war with Iran today, hours after announcing what he described as a very strong memorandum of understanding to halt the fighting. Speaking by phone to a campaign event in support of Burt Jones in the state of Georgia, Trump said Iran had agreed never to possess a nuclear weapon, describing that commitment as the primary objective of the negotiations. His remarks came after he cancelled additional military strikes that had reportedly been planned against Iran and hinted at a new agreement without disclosing the details.
Quietly at night. You guys didn't know that. Pretty cool, right?
Furthermore, Trump said Iran has agreed to a memorandum of understanding and will not obtain a nuclear weapon. U.S. President Donald Trump said his understanding is that Iran has agreed to a proposed deal and that all parties inside the country have accepted the terms, including Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. He reiterated that Iran will not be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon, describing the arrangement as a strong memorandum of understanding. Trump added that the situation in the region is stabilizing and that Iran is acting regionally and expected to approve a settlement. He also said the Strait of Hormuz would be reopened immediately after the agreement is signed and that a previously discussed military operation involving Kharg Island is no longer being considered.
He said there's never been anything close to what's happened.
A report said Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was not informed in advance of President Donald Trump's decision to cancel planned strikes on Iran. According to Axios, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu did not receive prior notice before U.S. President Donald Trump announced the cancellation of additional military strikes against Iran and suggested that a deal with Tehran could be reached soon. The report said Trump's announcement came without prior coordination with the Israeli leader. A later statement from an Israeli official cited by the Times of Israel indicated that finalized agreement with Iran. Trump said he halted planned military action after what he described as Iranian acceptance of a draft framework that would extend the ceasefire, reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and launch 60 days of negotiations over Iran's nuclear program. Iranian media said security forces prevented a tanker from entering the Strait of Hormuz without authorization. Iranian state media reported that Iranian forces intercepted a tanker attempting to enter the Strait of Hormuz without prior coordination. The reports came after accounts of explosion-like sounds near Bandar Abbas and off the coast of Sirik. However, Iran's Islamic Republic news agency IRNA later said no explosions had been reported in Bandar Abbas and suggested the sounds were linked to military activity at sea. According to Iranian media, a military source said that the noises heard near Sirik were related to Iranian forces confronting an oil tanker that attempted to transit the waterway. The source added that the vessel later complied with the passage restrictions after receiving warnings from the naval forces of the Revolutionary Guards Corps. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that U.S. President Donald Trump has committed to strict conditions in any future agreement with Iran. The office of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said U.S. President Donald Trump discussed a memorandum of understanding with Iran as a step toward formal negotiations. According to the statement, Netanyahu expressed appreciation for Trump's commitment to key conditions in any final agreement, despite Israel not being a direct party to the memorandum. The Israeli leader's office said Trump pledged that any future deal would include the removal of enriched nuclear material, the dismantling of Iran's enrichment infrastructure, limits on missile production, and an end to Iranian support for regional proxy groups.
This year, to President Trump.
It was a mistake, you know, when they wiped out Iraq.
Moving on to Lebanon, the Israeli occupation said it has taken control of Wadi al-Suluqi area in southern Lebanon despite a ceasefire arrangement. The Israeli occupation announced that forces from the 7th Armored Brigade and the elite Qnews unit have completed operation, it says, resulted in control over the Wadi al-Saluqi area in southern Lebanon, roughly 10 kilometers from the southern border. The occupation said the move is intended to prevent attacks launched by Hezbollah towards northern Israeli areas, including the Galilee region and the settlements of Metula. The statement follows earlier Israeli announcement of expanded operations in southern Lebanon, including strikes in Wadi al-Saluqi and al-Shaqif Heights area, alongside intensified air and artillery fire. Lebanon's health ministry said the death toll from ongoing hostilities has risen to around 3,711. Lebanon Ministry of Public Health reported that around 3,711 people have been killed and 11,483 others injured since the start of what it described as the ongoing escalation. Figures come amid repeated international calls for de-escalation, protection of civilians, and the urgent delivery of humanitarian and medical aid to affected areas. Officials and humanitarian actors continue to warn of a rapidly deteriorating situation in several regions as hostilities persist and access to relief remains constrained.
اسمع صوتك كيف
The current edition of the World Cup has kicked off across Mexico, Canada, and the United States, featuring a musical opening ceremony and thrilling, high-intensity matches. Mark Summers has the latest from the newsroom. Mark.
Well, the opening match on the first day of the World Cup has been held. Mexico and South Africa. The game took place at the iconic Azteca Stadium in Mexico City. So exciting to have the World Cup back. And Mexico's Julian Quinones unleashed a spectacular strike, and Raul Jimenez scored a header as the co-hosts beat the 9-man South Africa 2-0 in their opening World Cup Group A opener at Estadio Azteca last night. Quinones opened the scoring after Sfafalo Sitiole defensive error allowed Eric Lira to recover possession and set up the forward, whose powerful finish sent the home crowd wild under cloudy skies in Mexico City. South Africa's task became harder 5 minutes after the break when Sitole was sent off for a foul on Brian Gutierrez. Although Jimenez failed to make the resulting free kick count. The striker made amends in the 67th minute, heading in Mexico's second at the far post. And midfielder Themba Zwana was shown a red card for violent conduct in the 84th minute as South Africa finished with 9 men. While Mexico defender Cesar Montes was also sent off a foul in stoppage time. Mexico faced South Korea in Guadalajara on Thursday, while South Africa's next game is going to be played against Czech Republic. And Mexico fans erupted in celebration at Plaza Garibaldi on Thursday night after they beat South Africa 2-0 in the opening match of the 2026 World Cup at the capital's Estadio Azteca. It was a day of firsts for the World Cup as the first 48-team edition and the first to be held in 3 countries got underway in the first stadium to host 3 World Cup openers. Fans at Garibaldi roared after second goal, with one of them saying, "Mexicans always make a party anywhere. We don't need space, we just need the reason." And South Africa secured a 2-1 win over the Czech Republic in their opening World Cup match. South Korean national football team came from a competitive opening to defeat the Czech Republic team 2-1 in their Group A match at the World Cup. The match was held at the Estadio Akron in Guadalajara as part of the tournament hosted across, of course, Mexico, United States and Canada. South Korea edged a tight contest to take 3 points in the opening round of the group stage action. And I hope we have more of this Mexican music and more Shakira, please, over the next 6 weeks. Mona is back to you in the studio.
Yeah, Mark, good to see and hear some cheerful news for a change in this for this World Cup, and hopefully things would get for the better. And now we get back to a recap to what we were reading of our bulletin, and here are the top headlines making news this hour. Trump cancels planned Iran strikes, says deal near as multinational agreement advances. Egypt welcomes Trump's cancellation of Iran strikes, urges diplomacy and regional de-escalation. An Israeli occupation says they took control of Wadi al-Saluqi in southern Lebanon despite ceasefire deal. That concludes this hour's Qnews Bulletin. We will continue to follow the latest regional and international developments as they unfold. Stay with us for in-depth coverage, analysis and breaking updates across all platforms.